Well, Coach K, we're going. Thank you very much for joining the podcast today. I know you're a busy man this time of year, so I do really appreciate your time.
Well, no problem. I'm in Halifax. It's a pleasure to be out of Antigonish and get on the road. So and the playoffs are always exciting, even though I'm in the stands this year for the first time in close to 50 years. It's exciting, and my StFX team has a shot. I think they have a shot to win this, so it's going to be interesting.
Is there a little element of your being that's a little frustrated sitting in the stands? Your blood still must be pumping.
Yeah, it is, but no, I don't think so. I mean, I was ready to make the move, and I'm still involved in basketball in a lot of ways, as I'm sure will come out over the next little conversation here. But I'm still close to the StFX team. I mean, most of these players, except for one, actually, I had something to do with recruiting. Most of them I've coached, and including Terrell Vernon, who's the new coach, who I coached, and who I pretty much speak with him, not necessarily daily, but we're very close, and I feel like I'm part of this team as well.
That's a good feeling. He must be asking you for advice on, I don't want to say almost anything, but if there's a man to give advice in the role he's in, you're definitely it. So it must be able to answer. It must be nice being able to answer anything at a moment's notice.
Well, it is, but at the same time, it took a little bit of strategy on my part. The first part of the year, I intentionally kind of stayed away. I stayed close enough that the players knew that I was there supporting them, but for me to look over, Terrell's shoulder, too much early going. He had to establish this was his team,
yeah.
And so I kind of stayed away more or less. Except I went to the games first semester. This semester I come over a little bit more because it's Terrell's team. And
yeah.
Everybody knows it. The players feel it, but at the same time, like I said, I'm close to several of the players, and it's I'm rooting for them 100%.
Awesome. We're getting way ahead of ourselves here. I want to start back at the beginning. I want to know what it was like to grow up in Queens, New York. Correct?
Queens, New York.
And who introduced the sport of basketball to you? But I want to start about the growing up in New York. I've never been myself. One of the most famous cities in the world. What was it like growing up in Queens?
Well, when I grew up in Queens was more of a suburb. It's not a suburb anymore.
Okay.
Where the Elmhurst is where I grew up, and it was still you had some empty lots in the corner where you could play sandlot baseball or whatever. But now every inch is taken up, and Elmhurst now is a multicultural area. Where I think there's more languages spoken than in any zip code in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, in Elmhurst. But when I grew up in Elmhurst, it was, like I said, it was more of a suburb. But now, I go back. I go back on a regular basis now. Not so much now. That my brother, who was very much involved in basketball as a scout, he passed away last year. So it's I don't have the same connection to New York, but I still have a connection to New York. I have friends, and I was down there. I was down there in September for a memorial for my brother, and I still need to get that fix of going back to the city, get on the subway, and feel that again. That was part of my heritage.
So who introduced you to the sport?
Well, I kind of got introduced by myself. Nobody kind of said, come on, let's play basketball so much. I wasn't a very good athlete. I think the biggest introduction was when I went to high school. I went to Archbishop Malloy High School in Queens. You had to take the subway every morning to get there. It was a private, Catholic school. And, when I got to Malloy, they had, the previous year, had won the National Catholic Championship. And they were on a 48-game winning streak. So I walked into that gym, and I was just mesmerized by the whole spectacle of the players of that caliber. They were all being recruited by Division I schools. The coach was a Hall of Fame coach, ultimately. And I got turned on when I saw this, and I said, "Wow, I want to be part of this." And I wasn't ready by any stretch. I tried out for the freshman team and was probably one of the first players cut. And then I worked and worked. I went to the playground and played every day, every single day. And I made the junior varsity team, but I was way deep on the bench. And then the big hurdle was my junior year. I had to make the varsity team, which was one of the best teams in New York City. I really had to work extra hard and bypass all those players that played ahead of me on the junior varsity team. And I was able to do that through a lot of hard work. So it taught me persistence. It taught me how to handle adversity. I just fell in love with the game. My brother and I, who I mentioned just passed away, Tom Konchalski.
Sorry for your loss.
Thank you, Justin. He was probably the most renowned high school basketball scout in the United States.
Oh, that was his up till he passed away. That was his career, like
that
scouting in the States.
That was his career. He knew every coach in the United States. When we started a foundation in his name, which I'm the president of, the Tom Konchalski Foundation, to raise money to send kids that didn't have money to schools. And the first person that called me was Coach K in the South. Mike Krzyzewski called me and he said, "I'm going to give you $10,000 right away, $10,000 to start off the foundation. I want this thing to go." So he's been terrific. I've been on a regular, speaking with him regularly for the last 6 months or so.
And he's retiring this year.
Yes, and he's in a lot of pressure right now in the tournament.
Yeah.
Trying to finish off an unbelievable career on a high note. But anyway, those are the type of people that are involved in my brother's foundation. And so that's kept me, involved in the game. But my brother and I, when we were 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, we used to go to Madison Square Garden every Thursday. They had these triple headers, 3 college games. And now, mind you, this was 1960. So with a GO card, which was called a General Organization card, that every student in New York City could get, for 50 cents you could sit up way in the nosebleed seats. 50 cents, sit up in the nosebleed seats in Madison Square Garden and watch, college basketball. And
wow.
We did that. We fell in love with it. And then to piggyback on that. Okay, so after doing that for 2 or 3 years, and idolizing all those players in Madison Square Garden, I told you I made the high school team my junior year, and we played a preliminary game in Madison Square Garden.
No.
Yep.
How many people were in the stadium?
Well, that's all I'm going to explain to
sorry.
you. We played the games like at 5 o'clock, and then the game after us was the New York Knicks against the Philadelphia Warriors, led by Wilt Chamberlain. So we played the preliminary game before that, but we were there at 5 o'clock. We came out for warm-ups, and I don't think there was one person in the stands. But I was having been and watched all these great players, Oscar Robertson, Wilt Chamberlain. I watched all these great players in Madison Square Garden. I was shaking like a leaf.
Yeah.
I was so to be on that Garden court was just. It was a dream come true. I got in the game. I don't think I scored that game, but I got in the game and ran up and down the court a couple of times, whatever. But then the Knicks took on the Warriors with Wilt Chamberlain after that game. That was an amazing experience.
Wow, that's unbelievable. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they call that the Mecca of basketball.
Well, New York City is the Mecca of basketball. It's lost its luster a little bit in the last 5 to 10, maybe 15 years. A lot of the top high school players in New York, they used to stay at home and go to St. John's University and New York University, and those teams were the top teams in the United States. But a lot of those kids, as is the case everywhere, including Nova Scotia, our best talent is going down to, the 2 players that have played in the NBA, Nate Darling and Lindell Wigington, both of whom I had the pleasure of coaching with the national team, the junior team, in 2017 when we won the world championship. They both went to they did their high school in the United States. And that's what's happened in New York City. I mean, it's just not happening in Nova Scotia. In New York City, the top players are going to these prep schools. In could be anywhere. Could be in the Midwest. Could be in the South. Whatever. But in New York, still, I mean, still people. Even LeBron was saying this last month. He said, when you come to New York City, when you play in the Madison Square Garden, it's a special game.
100%.
You know, because it is, even if, like I said, it's not maybe as much, like the New York Knicks haven't had successful teams in a long time. But, New York City's still a Mecca.
I have two questions for you. One, did your brother ever see LeBron in Akron? And two, have you ever taken a trip to Rutgers Park?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, my brother and I we used to go to Rucker every weekend.
What?
And we would go there, and we watched Chamberlain play there, Dr. J play there. You know, it was a different experience. I mean, there was no charge to get in or anything like that, and we just, you know, get ourselves immersed in the crowd, and it was amazing. Yeah, we went up there all the time, my brother and I. And the first part of it was, what was the first part of that question, Justin?
Did your brother ever see LeBron James in Akron?
Oh, my brother was close. He I don't know if he ever saw him actually in Akron, but he saw him at the 5-star basketball camp, which he and which Tom was very much involved in, which was the top camp in the United States back in those days.
Okay.
So he knew LeBron.
Yeah.
Tom knew Tom knew every. You know, if Tom walked into a gym and there was Kobe Bryant was at the other end of the gym, Kobe would head over to see Tom. To be the first person to see him. Tom was just well known by, you know, he helped so many players and so many coaches, and that's why the foundation has been established in his name, because that's what he did. He helped people. He helped coaches get coaching jobs. Billy Donovan, who's the head coach of the Chicago Bulls right now, he won 2 national championships at the University of Florida. I was with the national team in Brazil. This is 9-10 years ago, and it's a little town in Brazil. We're with the junior. I was with the junior national team, trying to qualify for the World Championship tournament. Anyway, Billy Donovan was coaching the U.S. team, and I had never met Billy Donovan. So I'm standing outside of our hotel, and I look over, and Billy Donovan he's going for a jog. So it's a nice Sunday morning or whatever, a sunny day, and he's going for a jog, and he sees me, and he comes over, diverts his route, comes over to me, and he says, "Mr. Konchowski," which I'd rather if he called me Steve or whatever. But anyway, he was honoring my brother by calling me Mr. Konchowski. He said, "I just want to let you know that if it wasn't for your brother, I wouldn't be here right now." Because Tom got him a scholarship when he was a kind of an unknown high school player out in Long Island, New York. Tom knew about him, talked to Providence College, the coach of Providence College, who was at the time Rick Pitino, got him a scholarship, and he ended up like an All-American at Providence College. But Tom made the connection, gave him the break. Anyway, that's our history in New York. You can't talk about it without talking about my brother, because he was front and center, and still is. Even though he's passed away for over a year, he still is through the foundation.
Wow, that's incredible. I could sit here and talk for hours about just that part of your life. We got to move on, because there's a lot of people listening that want to know other aspects. But I think that the beginning and the roots of your basketball foundation, New York, that's a great place to start. And if you look at your career and where it went, and
for sure
to have that foundation, I think that helped.
Sure.
Where did the connection come to the Maritimes? You're living in New York, and then I'm pretty sure you went to Dal to start. You got a law degree.
Well, I got a law degree, but that was after I did my 4 years at Acadia. And and that's how I got up here.
But
the coach of Acadia, Stu Aberdeen, who was a terrific coach. He was from upstate New York. He was friends with my high school coach, Jack Curran. And Jack Curran, so anyway, Stu Aberdeen came down to New York, and he asked Jack Curran to get some players together that might be interested in going to college up in Canada. So Jack Curran got 25 or whatever players together, not just at Archbishop Malloy, but he got players from Bishop Lachlan and all the different bunch of schools.
Okay.
Mostly probably from the CHSAA, which was the Catholic High School League, but probably some of the public schools too. I don't remember.
So we did a recruiting trip.
Yeah, okay. But it was right at Malloy. It was just he came in and watched us play, and Coach Aberdeen, recruited me basically out of that scrimmage that we had.
Okay.
He talked to me afterwards, came to visit my parents or whatever. After a couple of months thinking about it, I said, no, I don't think I want to go to Canada. I mean, I'm in New York City, and this is Wolfville, Nova Scotia. It's another world, right? So I said, no, I don't think I want to come. He says, well, no. He didn't take no for an answer, came back down to New York, and talked my parents into it. And I ended up, that's how I got to Canada, going to Acadia University in 1962. Coincidentally, Jack Curran, like my high school coach, he had a baseball career prior to coaching high school basketball, which he also coached high school. He was the winningest coach in New York State in high school basketball and in high school baseball. He won 1,700-something games in baseball. He coached for 55 years. So when I coach for 46, it makes his 55 makes me look like I left early, But anyway, Jack Curran, his connection to Nova Scotia was, as a baseball player, he pitched for the Kentville Wildcats when he was in college, which would have been like early 50s.
Oh, wow.
He pitched because American players could come up and play in Canada and get paid and not violate any NCAA rules because it was another country, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of guys that played in the major leagues came up and played in the old H&D league and Halifax Dartmouth baseball league.
Oh,
and Jack Curran played for the Kentville Wildcats, 7 miles away from Wolfville, right? So he knew the area. He knew. So when Coach Aberdeen recruited me, Jack Curran could relate to that, relate to the area, or tell me a little bit about what it was like and whatever. So
there's a rumor or a myth out there that Babe Ruth owned a house in Wolfville, and he came up here in his summers and just loved it.
I couldn't verify that one at all.
No?
But I know he was up here in the summers. I know I've seen pictures of him wearing in his dress clothes, putting on a hitting exhibition.
Yeah, I saw that picture as well.
Yeah. So that would have been amazing, but I can't verify that.
No.
You'd have to talk to somebody more knowledgeable.
Knows the baseball world.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, at what point of your playing career did you realize that you have maybe had a little bit of an interest in a coaching career?
At no point in my playing career did I ever think I was going to coach. I just looked at Coach Aberdeen, who I loved and who was an amazing coach, and I would drive by. I lived off campus my last couple of years, and I'd drive my old Vauxhall that I bought for $75 or something like that. I'd drive that to my apartment off campus, and I'd look up at the gym, and I'd see the light on at 11:30 at night, and I'd say, I don't want this. I don't want a job like this that consumes you that kind, that. But anyway, what happened was, after, as you mentioned, I went to law school. I had a little bit of time to think about it because I had to go after law school, it was during the Vietnam era. And, I was draft eligible, not for the NBA draft, but for the U.S. Army draft. And Vietnam was right. Look, I was staring, staring my eye at Vietnam, right? And anyway, I had to get my draft status straightened away, which I did. It took me a whole year. I eventually got a medical disqualification for a back injury that I had sustained in basketball, which was a legitimate injury. But anyway, it took me a year to figure that out. So then after that year, I came back. I gravitated just back to say, I'm about to come back to Nova Scotia. That's where my friends are. That's probably where I'm going to live. And I was offered the JV coaching job at Acadia, junior varsity. And I said, okay, I'm not ready to jump into a law practice or anything like that right away. This'll keep me busy for a while. And I was the start of it. I just loved, I enjoyed coaching, and I took off from there. And I got a real break early in my career when Jack Donahue, who was the coach of the national team, originally from New York City, again goes back to that coaching connection. He was very close with my high school coach, Jack Curran. Jack Donahue got the coach of the coaching job for the national team, the Canadian national team. And I met him at a clinic in Montreal. And I told him, I introduced myself. He kind of didn't really remember me, but knew my coach really well. And the following year, he offered me a job as manager of the national team, the manager. And I said, look, I'll take that job as long as you get me involved in the coaching. I'll do all my managerial things. I'll do the laundry or whatever you want me to do.
No way.
But I want to get involved in the coaching. And he took me on, and we traveled the world. We went to Cuba. We played in front of Fidel Castro. That was an amazing experience. We were playing Cuba in Havana, and there's a big mural of Che Guevara on the wall of the stadium. Anyway, 10 minutes or so into the game, Fidel walks in with his entourage, and the game stopped. Like the whole gym just stopped.
Like literally?
The
like
game
the whistle?
Stopped. They stopped. The referees blew the whistle while he was walking in respect for him, right? And he as he proceeded to his seat, which was above, right below the mural of Che Guevara, right at center court, above the court. It took him a couple of minutes to get there. We probably had 8 or 10 people with him walking through, and he was wearing his military garb, as was his. That was his uniform in those days. And the game stopped, and everybody clapped. The whole stadium, the referees, everybody clapped and continued to clap until he sat down in his seat. And once he sat down, the game resumed. And I was an American, had an American passport. I hadn't taken out my Canadian citizenship at that point. So I'm an American in Cuba in 1973, and that was pretty dangerous. I had a special visa to be there with the team, so you can be sure I clapped harder than anybody. 'Cause I did not. Anyway, those were the experiences I had, and the next year, I'm in training camp. Go into training camp, 1974. I go into training camp, national team training camp, as the manager, and then the assistant coach had to leave. He took on a new job at his university, and he had to exit for the summer. So I was sitting there as the manager, and Jack Donahue just never replaced the assistant coach. He just slipped me over to the assistant coaching position. And I was there for 16 years.
Wow.
Went to 3 Olympic Games.
Wow.
And it just goes to show you, life will take you in strange ways. The New York City connection got me with the national team. My willingness to take on a managerial job, work my way up, put me in a position to, get lucky and take off from there. And I've been working with the national team program. Jack Donahue retired, and then in 1975 the job opened up. 1995 the job opened up, and I was selected as the head coach of the national team, which a position I held for 4 years. I got to coach Steve Nash.
I was going to say Steve Nash.
Yeah,
yes.
I got to coach Steve for 2 or 3 summers.
What's he like?
Amazing. He was, people. I was on a similar podcast in Newfoundland actually last week.
Okay.
With all these young provincial team players, and there's one young boy asked me, who was the greatest player that you ever coached? And I said, well, Steve Nash. And I said, not just because of, his talent and his NBA credentials, two-time NBA MVP, but just what a tremendous teammate that he was, and what a great player he was to coach. You tell him to do something or ask him to do something, yes, coach. He'd be the first player at the gym and the last player to leave. He just was, and I coached him when he was young. He was just in the first couple of years in the NBA. So he was a young player. He hadn't achieved. And the best Steve Nash story I can tell is, and I related this to this young player because it's a great message for young players. His first year in the NBA, he's with the Phoenix Suns. He's playing behind Jason Kidd and Kevin Johnson, two NBA All-Stars, right? And he wasn't getting on in the games. Like I look at the NBA box scores every day, like I still do. And in particular, I had an interest in him because I was his coach. And so I'm checking. This is in like February or March. Checking on all my players who were playing, most of them around the world. Some of them playing in Lebanon and Spain or whatever. So I called Steve and I figured 14 games in a row, he failed to get in a game. DNP-CD, did not play, coach's decision. That's what it says opposite your name.
Okay.
14 games in a row, he doesn't get in the game. So I figured, all right, I'm going to call Steve. This is going to be tough. It's going to be a tough call.
Yeah.
I said, Steve, how are you doing? He said, I'm doing great. So eventually I got around to, not right away, but I got around to, how are you dealing with not getting into these games? And he said, Coach, I'm dealing with it fine. He said, the practices are my games. He said, I'm playing against, every day in practice, two of the best guards in the NBA. And if I can get ready for every practice and challenge them, as much as I can, work as hard as I can against those two guys, I'm going to get where I want to get to eventually. Now, how can you have a better attitude than that?
Absolutely.
And that's what Steve Nash was all about. That's what Steve Nash is all about. He's not he's over himself in sense of he's not, the ego part of it doesn't enter into the picture. He understands what the world is all about. He's socially conscious, and he was just a tremendous guy to coach and a great teammate.
It's incredible. Wow. Yeah, you're blowing me away right now that you could just call Steve Nash and ask that question. He just said that so casually. That's unbelievable. And to see where he is now as the coach in Brooklyn.
Yep.
It's great.
He's got him. I think he's bitten off more than he wanted to chew in this situation. But if anybody can do it, he can. He'll help. But he'll be able to relate to players, and you saw it in his the way he's handled this whole Kyrie, Harden situation. He seems to have taken it in stride and showed respect for his players because he could easily have thrown them under the bus. Kyrie for not getting vaccinated and only be available for at first no games and then eventually away games.
Yeah.
But Steve has handled it pretty well.
Yeah, managing ego and millionaires must be a whole different side of the job that maybe few can handle. That would be a whole nother thing.
Exactly.
The players that I've talked to that have been coached by you say you do one thing incredibly well is you bring a team together and you recruit very well. One story I found out was about in 1993 when you won your first national championship. You actually recruited 4 years earlier three gentlemen from Central African Republic. Richard Bella, I'm going to mess up this second name here, Aristide in Gilly Bay.
Aristide in Gilly Bay. Well, you did a good job with that one.
Thank
good
you.
Job.
And Guy Mamango.
Mabango, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Three individuals from Africa coming to Nova Scotia in the middle of a winter I'm not going to say it's totally your responsibility, but it kind of is your responsibility for these players at the beginning. They're how old? 18, 19 when they're coming
They
in?
were a little bit old.
Older.
They were basically between 20 and 22. They were a little older, but at the same time, they were young people from a different part of the world.
So when you're putting your trust in these three individuals to come from another part of the world, I'm assuming you're having conversations with their families. I'm assuming you're trying to sell Nova Scotia to them. What was it about, I guess, maybe your skill set that allowed you to have the confidence in yourself to say, look, I'm going to bring these three individuals over to another part of the world, and guess what? We're going to win. We're going to have fun, and you're going to grow into men. Where does that come from you? Where do you get that confidence from?
Well, first of all, I became very familiar. This was 1988 when I recruited them at the Seoul, South Korea Olympics.
Okay.
And by that time, I had been working with the national team since 1973. So my view of the world, fortunately through my travel, basketball has taken me to 35 countries around the world. So I think I have a global perspective of not only basketball but of the world. Because I've had a chance to travel to different and seen different cultures and see how people live. And so anyway, this was really, and I'm glad you brought this up, Justin, because this is probably one of the more interesting things I've ever done in basketball. So we're at the Olympic organization meeting at the start of the Olympics. You have I was one of the assistants, and the other assistant is Doc Ryan, who a great friend of mine who's still coaching as the assistant coach at StFX. We were the assistant coaches with the national team, and Jack Donahue sent us to this organizational meeting. After the meeting, and you're just figuring out logistics about bus schedules and things like that. Anyway, after the meeting, this gentleman comes up speaking French, and I don't speak French, but Doc does, and said, we have three of our players from Central African Republic. We want to send them to North America. Well, they probably approached the U.S. team too. I don't know, but I'm not sure what kind of interest they had. But three players that we'd like to send to North America or Canada to get their education. Education was very important for them. Anyway, so I asked through Doc interpreting, what positions did they play? He said, well, they're 6'7", 6'8", and 6'9". And I said, well, you're talking to the right people here. Anyway, we went to see them play, and one of them was just phenomenal. Richard Belly, you could see the phenomenal, 6'9", 255 pounds of sheer muscle, pretty raw. But this guy there was nothing like him in Canada at that time,
really?
Anywhere. And then Guy Mabongo was he was about 6'7", but a great body, but really young, raw talent. And then Aristide actually wasn't with the team. He was injured, so he didn't make the trip. But They wanted to send all three. Anyway, we met. So we went and watched them play, and our eyes just, we just flipped out when we saw Bella, how good this guy was. We said, we'll take anybody else with him, as long as we can get, to get a player of his caliber or athletic size, it was amazing. Anyway, so we met with their Minister of Sport. We met with all their, all the people from the Central African contingent and whatever, and we worked this out. And we said, look, we don't have a full scholarship, so we can offer them partial scholarship. But so they worked out something where they would get a bursary. They would pay a partial bursary from their government, from their basketball association.
So,
right?
sorry, who pays who? They pay.
They would pay to them, and they'd pay the university.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
For their
okay.
For their tuition, room, and board, whatever the difference was between what we were allowed to give to them. So we worked all that out, but that's still. So that was in September, and they got here in January, and they couldn't speak one word of English. They were all good students, but they couldn't speak English, and they left Central Africa. It was like 38 Celsius, and they got to Nova Scotia, and it was like minus 16.
I was going to say January.
It was right in the middle of January 23rd. Never forget the day.
Who picked them up at the airport?
Picked them up at the airport.
You did?
Yeah, with Doc. Doc could speak French, so he could speak with them.
Yeah.
Took them to their residence. And I had prepared our team for this. I said, look, we're going to, they weren't eligible to play that year. They were going to play the following year. But we brought them over to learn English. And actually, we enrolled them at Dr. John Hugh Gillis High School, even though they already had their high school, education and were accepted at StFX. But they went there to learn English as a second language, right? So these 6'9" guys walking around his high school. But anyway, that's where they learned their English. So they were prepared for the following September.
Yeah.
They were going to have like 9 months of English training.
Yeah.
To learn the language. Anyway, the two of them. This is a funny story. So I said, look, we have practice. Do you guys want to come over to practice? So Richard, the best one of them, right? He had a headache or whatever, and he said, no, I'm going to rest. So he rested. The other two came over to practice, and the other two were pretty raw. So I had prepared our team. Look, we've got 3 players from Africa coming over.
Yeah.
I didn't hype them up too much. I just said, take this as a cultural experience. This is an opportunity to learn about people and vice versa from a different part of the world, and to bring them in our locker room and embrace them. So I had prepared them for that. So anyway, Guy and Aristide come in, and they practiced with us. Now, first of all, they'd been traveling for 3 days. Second of all, they didn't know the language or anything. And third of all, they weren't really very good players at that time.
Yeah.
It was just basically raw material, right? So my players are looking at me like, you brought these guys over from Africa? You know what I mean? So they didn't show up that well at practice that night. Anyway, the next day, Bella comes into the gym. And the first time he did a drill, he just hammer-dunked over, it turns out to be Leo McPherson, who's now our athletic director, who was playing for me at the time. And he just hammer-dunked. We were doing a big man post drill, and he dunked the ball so hard the ball hit the ground and went up over the backboard, and the whole gym just turned around, and their eyes were like this, and they couldn't believe that the sheer athleticism of this guy. Anyway, the story goes forward to say that my family took them in. They became part of my family. They didn't live in my house, but they were visitors on a regular basis.
Yeah.
My children kind of grew up with them. My children learned about their culture. My wife would try to, cook some of their
Food.
meals that they were familiar with. She'd say, what do you guys usually have? And, what's your diet look like at home? And she'd try to have them over and replicate some of that just to make them feel at home a bit. And they didn't go home in the summers because they didn't have the money to do it. So they stayed all summer. And I was basically their surrogate father. And I ended up with Bella, I ended up being the best man at his wedding.
No way.
So,
wow.
And the story ends, so to speak, with they all graduated with a degree. When they started out, because of the language barrier, we put them into basically French courses and math courses. Okay. Right? So French they knew, and math is numbers, right?
Yeah.
So that was their first year. But they all got degrees in economics. They all graduated, and we won a national championship with them in
1993.
1993.
You got lifted up off the court that year.
It was amazing. It was the fans made a big X on the floor. Yeah. The fans made a huge X, a human X on the floor, and people remember that. I don't know. I'm not a great hockey fan, but I know Elliot Friedman, who. Well, Elliot was covering that. I knew Elliot quite well in his younger years. We covered basketball back in those years. So Elliot when I retired last year, had a little note. He does something on social media where he like 31.
He has a podcast called 31 Thoughts. 32 Thoughts.
Okay, so I was number 32. A friend of mine sent me this. A friend of mine from Finland, actually, a coach in Finland, sent me this. He's a hockey fan, and I was number 32 when I retired. And what he talked about was the human X. He covered it as a young cub reporter, I guess. And what he talked about, in addition to his relationship with me, was that human X. It stuck with him all these years. Even though he's totally into hockey.
In the middle of the Metro Center, like at the center court, like a human X.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
So anyway, that was the story. That was the story of those three.
That's great.
3 players. Yeah, it was amazing. It was one of the things that really warms my heart when I think about the things in my coaching career and the relationships I've had.
Amazing. And to go back, we've talked to a couple of your players, and they've answered this question, but I don't think they've answered it very well. And I think hopefully you can answer it. But we've all had coaches, all 3 of us in this room have had coaches that you really want to play for, and coaches that you're like, yeah, I'm not working my butt off for this guy. But from players that have been coached by you, you're the definition of someone that you're willing to go out on the floor and do anything to win. You get players to respond to your coaching style. What is it about your coaching style that allows players to do anything to win, as long as it's by your game plan? What do you think it is?
Well, I think it's building relationships. And that's what I learned from Jack Donahue, who was, one of my mentors, probably my number 1 mentor, not just about basketball, but about life. And he built relationships. That was his thing. And I think by building relationships, earning trust, and it's trust, respect, both of those, they're 2-way streets, and you have to look at it like that way as a coach. You just can't say, okay, I'm the coach, you got to respect me. You have to earn the respect of the players, and the way you earn the respect of the players is to treat them right, be honest with them, but be there for them, not just as basketball players, but as people, help them through their journeys through university, from academics to social, to the social part of it, to having to deal with issues that come forward off the court, not just on the court. And I think if you build that trust, then you get to a point where on the court they're going to go that extra mile, and they're going to want to win for themselves, for the team. But I'm part of it as a coach.
How many years did it take you to learn that rule? Like, okay, these players are responding to what I'm saying by the trust that they have in me and the relationship that we have. Or did it just come naturally?
I think it's the answer to that is kind of multifaceted. I think I'm going to go back and say, my parents are, had a lot to do with the way I grew up and how I approached life. I think my experience at Archbishop Malloy, where I had to work so hard, to get even on the team, and then in my senior year, I sat on a bench, in a situation where I expected to play. I did play my first several games, and then Jack Curran, who, like I said, a Hall of Fame coach, he decided to go with the younger players, and I sat on the bench. And I think going through that, the first of all, the challenge of having to go from like scratch to make one of the best high school teams in the country, and then not getting to play and having to deal with being on the bench, gave me an empathy for players, that not just well, you're good enough, okay, fine. If you're not good enough, just not going to play you. I always felt because I told my teams, listen, I've sat on a bench more than any of you guys, so I know what it's like, But I'm not going to put you in the game if you haven't earned it. But at the same time, I think that's the part. That's what I think is what part and parcel of my coaching philosophy is to build relationships and earn the trust of my players. And I think that that can get you through a lot of tough situations, and that also creates those relationships, and that will last past the 4 or 5 years that they play in university, and to make friendships that are going to last. With players like Jonathan Bell, who I know you've had here.
Great guy.
And basically that was the connection why I'm here, I guess, through John. But to have friends for life, if you treat people the right way and care about them in more than just basketball players.
Is it an underlying goal of yours to make sure that these men go on to be, good husbands, good business owners, good just people in life? Is that kind of an underlying goal as well for you, rather than just great basketball?
Definitely. If you're an educator, that has to be. You're just not there to win basketball games.
Yeah.
I think you can do both, but you simultaneously win basketball games and still treat people the right way.
Yeah.
And build the foundations for it's an interesting age group, that 18 to 23, because then they're at that age they're not children anymore. They're becoming adults, but they're trying to navigate the world. Like, where am I going, and where do I fit? Where do I fit in this world?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them know a little bit more about where they're going than others. Most, like myself, when I was that age, had no idea. As you know, I went to law school and became a basketball coach. So, but they don't know. They don't really. If you can help them along that pathway, then like I said, you've done something more than just teaching jump shots, and you've done something that's going to benefit them for the rest of their lives, and be satisfying for yourself to see what they do with their lives going forward.
Amazing. So at this portion of your life, what do you still have any goals, or is it just, do you want to maintain a relationship with the game of basketball? I know you said the Growlers. What are they called? Sorry, the new team you're with?
Newfoundland Growlers.
Newfoundland Growlers.
Yeah, that's one of the Canadian Elite Basketball League.
Yeah.
Started up 3 years ago. This is the 4th year. They have franchises from Vancouver right through to now Newfoundland, so nice. Coast to coast, 10 franchises. They operate in the summertime, and it's a professional league. The players get paid between $400 and $1,500 a game. It's a 20-game schedule. And 5 players who played in the league last year got called up to the NBA.
No.
So,
wow.
Including Lindell Wigington, who's still with, from Dartmouth, who's still with the Bucks right now. So the caliber of the league is good. It's not, it's not college basketball. It's a higher level. It's a professional basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, they asked, since I retired, I always said, look, I'm retiring from StFX, but I'm not retiring from basketball. It's in my blood. It's always going to be in my blood. And this was a good situation, and it is a good situation because I don't have to be, on the bench. I don't have to be. I'm an advisor. My title is senior advisor for basketball operations. Basically, the team is owned by the Newfoundland Growlers hockey organization. So they basically brought me in to be a buffer, work with the coaches, but also work with the organization from basketball perspective in terms of advising.
Okay.
What we should do in this situation, what should we do here, and right now I'm heavily in with the coaches. We hired the coaches, which is the first thing we did, and then now I'm dealing with the coaches and I have meetings on probably every day or two. Yeah. We're putting a lineup. We're putting a roster together. We've signed 3 players so far, including Terry Thomas, originally from East Preston, who played at StFX for a few years for me. And, so that's keeping me busy. My brother's foundation is keeping me busy, and we've started up a Basketball Coaches of Canada Coaching Association, which is keeping me involved in the game. So I'm not behind the bench anymore. I'll leave that to the younger guys. Yeah. But I think what I can do is I can help develop the game and help develop coaches. Like coaching development is really important for me. Like our head coach with the Growlers is Patrick Ewing Jr. Patrick Ewing Sr., of course, being the NBA All-Star and Hall of Famer. But his son, Patrick Ewing Jr., is our head coach. So I work with him almost on a daily basis. And he's got a lot of experience around the game, played in the NBA, played overseas, works with his dad at Georgetown, but never been a head coach.
Yeah.
So, I have an opportunity to mentor him,
Yeah.
as we go forward. And that's really what I see myself doing, is giving back to the game by, developing coaches, and in this case with the Growlers, helping them get off the ground, build a team from scratch.
Was there any fight back at all from your family? Like, you've worked your whole life and you have this 1 year of retiring. Was there any take a year, any like that? Or they know you love it, so they say go for it?
No, they know I love it. They all want me to do it.
Do they? Okay, good.
Yeah. It's actually killing them that I have my children are all in their, mid to late 30s.
Okay.
And have families of their own, or two of them do. Anyway, but they for them, it's hard for them to watch StFX play without me being behind the bench.
Are they up here with you now?
No.
No.
They would have been had the playoffs been. One of them was coming. My daughter Maria, who lives in Toronto, would have come had the playoffs been. She had tickets for the plane tickets for the playoffs when they were originally scheduled.
Okay.
But now they got pushed back because of COVID, right?
Yeah.
So she's not here. But I actually, I'm all totally fine with. I don't have any. I'm not sitting there wishing I was on the bench. I'm happy with watching the team play, seeing how they developed. Terrell Vernon, like I said, our new coach he and I are close friends. I'm happy to see what he's doing with the team, and I don't have any regrets or saying I should be there. I mean, the only thing I say is it was a disappointment not to be able to retire in the proper way. My whole retirement plan was based upon StFX hosting the national championship tournament at Scotiabank Place last March, and that's how I built my retirement plan. Into finishing up in. I still call it the Metro Center, all right?
Yeah, me too.
And finishing up in the Metro Center where we won 3 national championships, where I had my greatest success, finishing up on the bench in the Metro Center. And that didn't happen. But, COVID prevented a lot worse things, around the world than that. So keeping that perspective, missing a basketball tournament is not the end of the world. But still, it's a disappointment. But other than that, I'm fine with. I'm happy with Terrell, what he's doing. I'm fine with what I'm doing with basketball right now. It's keeping me interested and involved. And I'm just going to keep doing it as long as I'm healthy and the opportunities present themselves.
Could you potentially pull a Tom Brady? Come back?
No, that's not going to happen.
It's over.
I'm done behind the bench.
You're done.
No, I'm done behind the bench, and I'm enjoying the advisory, the kind of the mentorship, advisory position. It's right. That's what's the right fit for me right now.
Awesome. I'm gonna let it be here. I want you to give just a little bit of advice to someone that's looking to carve out a career, not essentially in basketball. It could be business. It could be anything. A little bit of career advice for that, mid 20-year-old looking to take charge of the world.
Well, I would say, first of all, follow your heart. And as I did when I switched gears from, law to basketball, follow your heart. And this is a bit of a cliche, but, make every day your masterpiece. And what I mean by that is take every day and say, whatever you're doing, make the best of it. If it's going to the beach, then seeing your friends, then engage with your friends and build those relationships. If it's you have a task of work to do it to the best of your ability. Take every day and make some good positive things happen out of that day, and those days add up, and you're eventually going to get where you want to get to.
Okay. Coach K, I want to thank you very much for coming on this show. I really do appreciate your time, especially now with the tournament going on. So I'm sure a lot of people want your time. So to give it to this podcast, means the world to me. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you asked some great questions, and brings some of these things that we had a chance to reminisce about today. Brought back some great memories. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries. I can't wait to one day get to New York, and maybe I'll go to Rutgers Park. I'm going to think of you. So we'll make it happen.
Go do it.
Awesome. All right, everyone listening, thank you very much for tuning in. It's Friday. The weekend is here. Have fun. Head on down to Scotiabank Center, a.k.a. the Metro Center. Watch some basketball. That's all I got to say. We're out. Peace. Thank you.